Call the cops. He's building illegally on HOA land. That's what she screamed as I stood on my grandfather's old farmhouse porch, the one I'd spent months restoring after buying it back from foreclosure. 2 police cars came tearing up the gravel drive, lights flashing across the fresh boards I'd just repaired. The woman in the pink blazer pointed like royalty, claiming her territory, convinced she could dictate what happened on my family's land. It was a cold June morning in Vermont. I'd been elbow deep in rotted wood and memories, fixing the crooked front door that had hung loose since my grandfather died. The air smelled of sawdust and pine, the same scent that took me back to being 8 years old, following Grandpa Pierce around with a hammer I could barely lift. He used to say, "Nobody can take what's rightfully yours, Landon, not as long as you know your rights and keep your paperwork straight." That promise echoed in my head when a white Lexus SUV rolled up my drive. Out stepped a woman dressed for a real estate ad, not a construction site. Cordelia Blackwood, president of the Riverside States Homeowners Association, clipboard in hand. She smiled the way people do when they're about to cause trouble. "I believe we need to have a conversation about your project here," she announced. I told her politely that this property wasn't part of any HOA. It had been Pierce land since 1903, long before a subdivision even existed. Her expression tightened. She produced a survey map showing new red ink boundaries that conveniently swallowed my acreage. The document was so obviously altered it would have made a county clerk laugh. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "that's not a legal record. HOA authority must be filed and agreed to by owners within the development. My property has never been part of yours." Her face flushed pink to match her blazer. "Mr. Pierce, you don't understand the seriousness of the situation. We cannot allow substandard work that hurts community values." Translation: she wanted control, but I had no intention of bowing to a woman waving fake paperwork. When I refused to pay her review fees, she warned me I'd be hearing from her again and sped off, tires spitting gravel. A few days later, I did. A thick envelope stamped official notice of violation. 20 alleged infractions filled the pages. Unauthorized alterations, non-conforming materials, violation of aesthetic standards. Half the building code she cited didn't even exist for properties outside town limits. One section number she quoted referred to swimming pool safety barriers, not farmhouse trim. That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance. It was deliberate intimidation. I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled every document with the Pierce name. The records proved the truth. 2.3 acres, clear boundaries, 0 HOA jurisdiction. Riverside Estates had been incorporated only 4 years earlier, covering exactly 47 lots, none of them mine. Worse yet, 3 neighbors had already filed similar complaints about Cordelia's harassment. At the building department, Inspector Kovich confirmed my permits were perfect. "If you're not in an HOA," he said, "they have no say. Period." That night, I found a new post on the neighborhood app Nextdoor. Anonymous, concerned residents warning about an outsider doing unregulated construction. Photos of my property, clearly taken with a long lens camera, spread fast. Half the comments defended me. Half demanded the county intervene. I documented everything. Screenshots, violation letters, property deeds. When a white Lexus crawled past my house that night, headlights lingering, I knew Cordelia wasn't done. Next morning brought a cease and desist letter from her law firm, citing random Vermont statutes about water rights and snow removal, none of them remotely connected to HOA law. I almost laughed, then drove to the public library to research. Every precedent confirmed what I already knew. A homeowners association cannot unilaterally expand jurisdiction beyond its recorded covenants. That's when Eleanor Fairchild, a 79-year-old local historian, found me among the law books. "Heard you're having trouble with that Blackwood woman," she said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were newspaper clippings and meeting minutes showing how Cordelia had packed a vote years ago to seize control of the HOA. She'd been bullying neighboring owners ever since, testing how far she could push before someone pushed back. Eleanor advised me to meet the new mayor once the town council returned from recess. I promised I would. When I got home that afternoon, my heart sank. Someone had planted a Riverside Security Services sign right on my property line, an attempt to make it look as if my home was under HOA surveillance. I photographed it, pulled it out of the ground, and installed my own reel cameras. An hour later, my phone rang. Cordelia's voice was icy. "Mr. Pierce, removing HOA security signage constitutes theft of association property." "Ma'am," I replied, "placing that sign on my land is trespassing. If you continue, I'll call the sheriff." Her tone hardened. "You're making a mistake. The Riverside Estates HOA has resources for dealing with uncooperative property owners." I hung up and filed a harassment report. Deputy Martinez agreed it was trespass and warned that continued threats could become criminal. That night, as rain began to fall against the farmhouse windows, I cataloged every piece of evidence. Cordelia Blackwood had escalated from fake rules to legal bluffs to direct threats. She wanted a war over a house my family had owned for a century. What she didn't realize was that I'd already decided to fight, not with anger, but with facts. Saturday morning brought clear skies, and 2 police cars rolling up my driveway. Cordelia's white Lexus followed right behind. She stepped out like she was attending a gala, clutching a leather folder as if it were a crown. "Officers," she began sweetly, "this man is conducting illegal construction without HOA approval." The deputies listened, then turned to me. I handed them my county permits, original deed, and survey maps. Officer Garrison compared them carefully before turning back to her. "Ma'am," he said, "these permits are valid. Do you have official documents showing your HOA has jurisdiction here?" Cordelia's confidence cracked. "Our expansion was approved through community consensus," she stammered. "That's not legal jurisdiction," the officer replied flatly. By the time the patrol cars left, she was fuming. The sheriff's report now confirmed what I'd known all along. I was within my rights, and she was crossing the line. But Cordelia wasn't finished. Monday morning, my phone exploded with notifications from the neighborhood app. Someone had posted a long, polished essay about outsiders threatening community standards. The post never used my name but described my property in detail, complete with drone photos. Dozens of comments followed, some angry, some fearful. Within hours, fake accounts flooded the thread, calling my documents forgeries and hinting that I bribed officials. I responded calmly, posting proof of every permit and deed, but lies travel faster than paperwork. Days later, Cordelia's name appeared in the Millbrook Gazette. Her letter to the editor painted herself as a hero defending property values against a hostile homeowner using legal intimidation. When I met with the editor, Remington Shaw, he'd already heard from her supporters. But after I showed him my files, he leaned back and said, "Looks like she's running a PR campaign, not telling the truth." He promised to dig deeper. That Thursday, Eleanor called with news. Cordelia was hosting a community meeting at the library to address unregulated development. I knew what that meant, a public ambush. Eleanor urged me to attend, prepared and calm. Tuesday evening, the library was packed. Cordelia stood at the podium in a navy suit, her presentation filled with drone photos of my farmhouse outlined in red, graphs about property values, and fake municipal maps showing her invented oversight zone. The crowd nodded along, convinced she was saving the town from a reckless outsider. When she finally opened the floor, I rose. The room hushed as I walked forward with my folder. "Thank you for the opportunity." I began evenly. Let's look at the facts. I held up my documents, the century-old deeds, the official survey, the county building permits. This property has been in the Pierce family since 1903. It was never part of Riverside Estates and never subject to any HOA covenant. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Eleanor stood and confirmed my story, describing my grandfather's farm and its history. Several longtime residents backed her up. Cordelia's mask slipped. "You don't understand," she shouted. "This man's been manipulating city officials and using loopholes to avoid oversight." The contradictions were obvious. She called me both an ignorant outsider and a corrupt insider. The audience began to see through her performance. Eleanor's voice cut through the noise. "Cordelia, he's restoring his family's home. What exactly are you trying to protect?" Cordelia's composure shattered. "I am the authority here," she screamed. I decide what's appropriate for this community. That was her downfall. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously. Remington raised his hand and promised, "The Gazette will print every verified fact." Cordelia stormed out, fury echoing behind her heels. By morning, her empire began to crumble. The Gazette's front page headline read, "HOA overreach divides community. Facts contradict president's claims." The article included photos of my deeds and listed other families, the Hendersons, Kowalskis, Weatherbys, who'd suffered identical harassment. Soon after, I received a call from the Vermont Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Investigator Sarah Mitchell explained they'd been tracking similar HOA abuse cases. My evidence helped them build a statewide investigation into Cordelia's fraudulent practices. Days later, Cordelia filed a restraining order to stop my renovation, claiming irreparable harm to community standards. I spent the week assembling every document into a thick binder: permits, sheriff reports, photos, and even Eleanor's historical proof showing my farmhouse was the first structure ever built in the area. Court convened on Monday morning. Cordelia arrived with her lawyer and supporters, still radiating authority. Judge Temperance Vale presided, calm, sharp, and utterly unimpressed by theatrics. Cordelia's attorney presented altered maps and emotional pleas about protecting the neighborhood. Then came my turn. I laid out the 1846 land grant, the unbroken chain of deeds, and the county-issued permits. When asked about Cordelia's supposed laws, I pointed out that her cited Vermont statute actually dealt with water rights disputes. The judge's eyebrows rose. Then she asked me to state my name and occupation for the record. I hesitated only a moment. "Your Honor," I said, "my name is Landon Pierce. I'm the mayor of Millbrook, Vermont." The courtroom gasped. Cordelia went pale. She'd spent months accusing the town's own mayor of breaking laws he helped uphold. Judge Vale's ruling was swift. The request for a restraining order is denied with prejudice. The Riverside Estates HOA has no legal authority over Mr. Pierce's property. Evidence suggests a pattern of harassment that may constitute criminal conduct. She referred Cordelia's case to the county prosecutor for potential fraud and harassment charges. Within weeks, the story spread statewide. Cordelia Blackwood became a symbol of HOA abuse. My case became an example of how to fight back with documentation, not rage. 6 months later, the farmhouse stood fully restored, sunlight touching the same porch boards my grandfather once repaired. The Historical Society installed a bronze marker. Pierce Family Homestead, established 1846, restored 2024. The HOA dissolved, replaced by a community garden where neighbors work side by side. No clipboards, no threats, just cooperation. That Thanksgiving, I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching dawn rise over the fields. The house that nearly fell to false authority now stood as proof that real power lies not in intimidation, but in truth.